Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. What if everything you're being told about preparing for the future is designed to keep you stuck in the past? Right now, millions of people are making decisions about their education and careers based on a system that was built for a world that no longer exists. And here's what nobody's talking about. The people who will thrive in 2030 aren't the ones cramming the most information into their heads. They're the ones developing a completely different set of capabilities that have nothing to do with what's being taught in most schools and universities today. I've spent the last year interviewing founders, CEOs, and AI researchers who are literally building the future economy. And what they told me about the skills that actually matter contradicts almost everything we've been taught about success. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you the hidden framework these builders are using to future-proof their own children's education. More importantly, I'm going to give you a practical system you can start using today, whether you're 17 or 47, whether you have a degree or not, whether you're starting from scratch or pivoting mid-career. Because here's the truth that most career advice completely misses. The question isn't whether AI will take your job. The question is whether you're developing the specific meta skills that make you the person AI works for, rather than the person AI replaces. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which skills those are and how to build them faster than you ever thought possible. Before we talk about solutions, we need to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface of the job market. Everyone can see that things are changing, but most people are misdiagnosing the problem. They think this is about AI getting smarter. But that's not the real story. The real story is about which human capabilities are becoming exponentially more valuable and which ones are becoming commodities. Think about what happened to photography. When smartphones put a high-quality camera in everyone's pocket, the value of simply knowing how to operate a camera collapsed to essentially zero. But at the same time, the value of photographic vision, of understanding composition, storytelling, and emotional impact, that actually increased. The technical skill got democratized, but the creative judgment became more valuable than ever. That same pattern is playing out across every knowledge work field right now, except most people are still optimizing for the technical skills, the equivalent of learning which buttons to press on the camera, while completely ignoring the judgment skills that actually determine success. And this creates a massive opportunity for anyone who understands what's really being selected for. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. A few years ago, being able to write clean code was an incredibly valuable skill that could guarantee you a six-figure salary. Today, AI can generate that clean code in seconds. But here's what AI cannot do. It cannot decide which problem is worth solving. It cannot understand the messy human context that determines whether a technical solution will actually work in the real world. It cannot navigate the organizational politics of getting a project funded and shipped. Those skills, the ones that happen before and after the code gets written, those are becoming exponentially more valuable. The people I've interviewed who are thriving right now aren't the ones who know the most. They're the ones who can identify valuable problems, synthesize information from multiple domains, make decisions with incomplete information, and communicate their thinking in ways that move other humans to action. These are the skills that don't show up in any job description, but they're the actual skills that determine who gets promoted, who gets funded, and who builds something that matters. Here's something fascinating that kept coming up in my conversations with successful founders and executives. When I asked them what they look for when hiring, almost none of them mentioned specific technical skills or credentials. Instead, they talked about something much more fundamental: the ability to teach yourself hard things. This sounds simple, but it's actually one of the most misunderstood capabilities in modern education. Most people think teaching yourself means watching YouTube videos or taking online courses. But that's not really teaching yourself. That's consuming prepackaged information. Real self-teaching means you can take a problem where the answer doesn't exist yet, break it down into components, figure out which pieces of knowledge you need, acquire that knowledge from multiple sources, test your understanding, identify gaps, and iterate until you've built genuine competence. This is why one of the executives I spoke with said something that really stuck with me. He said at 18, you don't need to know what you're interested in. You need to prove to yourself that you can get good at something hard. The specific thing almost doesn't matter. What matters is going through the complete cycle of being terrible at something, struggling with it for months or years, and coming out the other side with real competence. Because once you've done that once, you have proof that you can do it again with anything else. This creates what he called inner confidence, the ability to bet on yourself when facing something new and difficult. And this is the meta skill that determines everything else. Without it, you'll always be dependent on someone else to tell you what to learn and how to learn it. With it, you can adapt to any change in the market because you're not locked into one specific skill set. You've proven to yourself that you can acquire any skill set you need. But here's the paradox that most people miss. The best way to develop this self-teaching ability is actually through structured education, whether that's formal schooling, intensive boot camps, or even self-imposed projects with real stakes. The structure isn't there to give you information. The structure is there to force you through the uncomfortable middle part of learning where you want to quit. It's the friction, the struggle, the moments of genuine difficulty that actually build this capability. This is why some of the most successful people I know have incredibly diverse educational backgrounds. Some have PhDs, some dropped out of high school, some did traditional 4-year degrees, some are completely self-taught. What they all have in common isn't the path they took. It's that they all went deep on something, stuck with it through the painful middle, and emerged with the confidence that they could learn anything. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. One of the biggest lies we tell young people is to follow your passion or pursue what you're curious about. This sounds great, but it's actually terrible advice for most people at most stages of their career. And understanding why this advice fails is crucial for building a real strategy. Here's the problem. Curiosity without discipline leads to what I call the curiosity trap. You start learning about AI, then you get interested in psychology, then you discover philosophy, then you want to learn music production. You accumulate hundreds of hours of learning across dozens of topics, but you never develop deep competence in anything. And deep competence is what the market rewards. Shallow knowledge across many domains feels intellectually satisfying, but it rarely translates into career opportunities or income. One of the CEOs I interviewed put it brilliantly. He said curiosity is essential, but it needs constraints. He teaches his kids to be observant about what could be better in their immediate environment, their school, their community, their daily routines. Not curiosity about abstract topics they'll never apply, but focused curiosity about specific problems they can actually solve. This trains what he calls productive curiosity, where your natural interest in how things work gets channeled toward creating tangible improvements. This distinction is massive. Unproductive curiosity makes you an interesting conversationalist. Productive curiosity makes you valuable. And here's the key insight: you develop productive curiosity by constraining yourself. Pick one domain, one problem space, one area where you're going to go embarrassingly deep for at least a year. Not because you're certain it's your life's calling, but because going deep on anything teaches you how to go deep, and that capability transfers. This is counterintuitive in an age where we're told to keep our options open and avoid specializing too early. But keeping your options open often means you never develop the depth that makes you exceptional at anything. The people who have the most options later in their career are usually the ones who went narrow and deep early, built genuine expertise, and then used that foundation to expand horizontally into adjacent domains. Think about it this way. If you spend 4 years being moderately curious about 10 different things, you'll have surface-level knowledge in 10 areas. If you spend 2 years going deep on one thing, developing real expertise, and then spend 2 more years deliberately expanding into complementary domains, you'll have deep knowledge in one area plus working knowledge in several adjacent areas, all connected by a coherent thread. The second path is dramatically more valuable, but it requires you to resist the temptation of infinite curiosity and make an actual commitment. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with someone who's been at the center of the AI revolution. When I asked him what he's teaching his own kids, what he thinks will actually matter when they enter the workforce, he didn't mention AI, coding, or any specific technical skill. He talked about something called systems thinking. And the more I've investigated this, the more I realize this might be the single most underrated capability for the next decade. Systems thinking means understanding how things interrelate rather than just understanding the things themselves. It's the difference between knowing a bunch of facts about tariffs and understanding how interdependent economies influence each other when tariff policies change. It's the difference between learning Python syntax and understanding how different components of a software system interact and affect each other. It's the difference between memorizing marketing tactics and understanding how customer psychology, platform algorithms, and business models connect to create sustainable growth. Here's why this matters so much in an AI-enabled world. AI is already better than humans at handling isolated tasks. It can write better code for a specific function, create better marketing copy for a specific campaign, analyze data more quickly. But AI is still relatively poor at understanding complex systems with multiple interacting variables, especially when those systems involve human behavior, organizational dynamics, or long-term consequences that aren't immediately obvious. The people who can think in systems, who can understand second and third order effects, who can see how changes in one part of an ecosystem will ripple through other parts, these are the people who will be designing what AI does rather than competing with what AI does. They're the ones identifying which problems are worth solving, which solutions will actually work in context, and how to navigate the messy reality of implementation. But here's what makes systems thinking so valuable. It's incredibly hard to teach in a classroom and almost impossible to fake. You can memorize facts for a test. You can follow a tutorial to build a project. But you can't fake systems thinking because it only develops through repeated exposure to complexity and the consequences of your decisions. You have to see how systems behave over time. You have to watch your predictions play out and learn from the times you were wrong. This is actually one of the hidden values of traditional education that people overlook. A good educational experience forces you to work with systems, whether that's understanding how historical events influenced each other, how biological systems maintain homeostasis, or how economic incentives shape behavior. The specific content matters less than developing the mental muscle of systems thinking. And this is why some of the most successful people in tech have seemingly unrelated educational backgrounds. They learned systems thinking in one domain and then applied it everywhere else. The practical implication here is huge. If you're choosing what to study or what to work on, don't just ask what skills you'll learn. Ask what systems you'll understand. Choose experiences that expose you to complexity, feedback loops, and interconnected variables. Work on projects where you have to consider how multiple stakeholders with different incentives will respond. Take on challenges where you can't just execute a checklist, where you have to understand the whole context to make good decisions. Now we need to talk about something uncomfortable. Something that every successful person I interviewed mentioned but almost nobody wants to hear. In a world where AI can instantly explain anything, where every answer is one query away, the ability to struggle with difficulty is becoming one of the most valuable capabilities you can develop. And most people are accidentally training themselves to avoid exactly this capability. Think about how learning works now compared to 10 years ago. Hit a confusing concept while studying? Ask ChatGPT for an explanation. Stuck on a coding problem? Copy it into Claude and get a solution. Don't understand a topic? Watch a YouTube video that breaks it down into digestible chunks. Every friction point in the learning process now has an instant solution. And while this makes information acquisition easier, it's destroying something crucial: the ability to sit with confusion and work your way through it. One of the AI researchers I spoke with said something profound about this. He said the most important thing from school isn't the knowledge you acquire. It's the discipline of teaching yourself through friction. It's learning how to be confused, how to feel stuck, how to push through that discomfort and emerge with understanding on the other side. That experience of productive struggle is what builds the mental muscle for tackling genuinely hard problems later. But here's the paradox. We're now raising a generation that's been trained to avoid this struggle entirely. The instant they feel confused, they reach for an AI assistant that smooths away the difficulty. They never experience the deep frustration of being stuck for hours or days. They never build the tolerance for ambiguity that's required for original thinking. And because they never experience this struggle, they never develop confidence in their ability to figure things out independently. This creates a dangerous dependency. People become incredibly effective at using AI to solve problems that have been solved before, but they're completely lost when facing problems that don't have existing solutions. They can execute brilliantly when there's a clear path, but they freeze when the path is unclear. And in an economy where AI can already handle everything with a clear path, this is a catastrophic weakness. So how do you protect this capability in yourself or develop it if you've lost it? You have to deliberately introduce friction into your learning process. Choose some things where you refuse to use AI assistants until you've genuinely struggled with them yourself. Tackle problems where the answer isn't immediately available. Commit to sticking with confusion for longer before seeking help. Build projects where you'll inevitably get stuck and have to figure your way out. This doesn't mean rejecting AI tools entirely. That would be silly. It means being strategic about when you use them. Use AI to accelerate learning after you've done the hard thinking yourself. Use it to check your understanding, to explore alternative approaches, to handle routine tasks. But don't use it to avoid the struggle that actually builds capability. Think of AI as a spotter in the gym. It's there to help you lift heavier than you could alone, but you still have to do the lifting. If the spotter does all the work, you don't get stronger. The people who will thrive in the next decade are the ones who can use AI to amplify their thinking without outsourcing their thinking. They're comfortable with extended periods of confusion because they've learned that confusion is where growth happens. They have the discipline to work through problems independently even when instant answers are available. This combination of AI leverage plus human discipline is going to be incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. Let's talk about something that's fundamentally changing how people evaluate talent and build careers. The credential-based system that dominated the 20th century is being replaced by something completely different. And if you're still optimizing for credentials rather than demonstrable capability, you're fighting the last war. Here's what's happening. When someone has a Harvard degree or a Google internship on their resume, that used to be a strong signal of competence. But that signal is getting weaker every year because the variance within credential holders is increasing massively. You can graduate from a top university having coasted through, leveraging AI to do most of your work, never genuinely struggling with difficult material. Or you can graduate having pushed yourself relentlessly, built real projects, developed deep expertise. Same credential, completely different capability. Meanwhile, someone without traditional credentials can now build a portfolio of work that demonstrates genuine competence in ways that are immediately verifiable. They can show their GitHub contributions, their published projects, their case studies, their content creation. Someone reviewing their work doesn't have to guess whether they're capable. They can see the evidence directly. This shift is creating a massive opportunity for people who understand how to build proof of work. And by proof of work, I mean things you've actually shipped that other people can examine and evaluate. Not theoretical knowledge, not test scores, not certificates of completion. Actual artifacts that demonstrate your capability to create value in the real world. The people I've interviewed who are hiring for their companies talk about this constantly. They're looking for evidence that you can ship, that you can take an idea from concept to completion, that you can handle the messy reality of getting things done in the world. And the beautiful thing about proof of work is that it's almost impossible to fake. You can embellish a resume, but your shipped projects speak for themselves. So how do you build proof of work? Start by making things public. If you're learning to code, contribute to open source projects. If you're interested in product development, document your process and insights publicly. If you're studying any domain, create content that helps others understand what you're learning. The specific format doesn't matter as much as the habit of creating visible artifacts of your thinking and capability. But here's the key distinction. Proof of work isn't just about volume. It's about demonstrating progressively increasing sophistication. Someone with one well-executed project that shows deep thinking is more impressive than someone with 50 shallow projects. Quality and depth matter more than quantity. You want your portfolio to tell a story of growth, of increasing capability, of learning from each iteration. This also changes how you should think about spending your time. Traditional career advice says get the best credentials you can afford, then leverage those credentials to get opportunities. New career strategy says build proof of work as early as possible, use that to create opportunities, and only get credentials if they're legally required or strategically valuable. In many fields, you can now leapfrog the credential stage entirely if your proof of work is strong enough. I've watched this play out with people I know. Someone spends 4 years getting a marketing degree, graduates with theoretical knowledge but no portfolio. Someone else spends those same 4 years building actual marketing campaigns for small businesses, documenting their results, learning from failures, building a body of work. By graduation, the second person has dramatically more opportunities despite lacking the credential because they can point to real results they've created. Now let's talk about something that might be more valuable than your skills, your credentials, and your experience combined. Your network. But not in the cliched way people usually discuss networking. Most advice about networking is terrible because it treats relationships as transactions. I'm going to show you a completely different framework that actually works. Here's what most people get wrong about networks. They think networking means collecting contacts, going to events, adding people on LinkedIn, sending cold messages. They treat it like a numbers game where more connections equals more opportunities. This is backwards and it doesn't work. Real networks, the ones that create genuine opportunities, are built on providing value first and building authentic relationships over time. One of the founders I spoke with described his approach to building relationships, and it completely changed how I think about this. He said when you're young and don't have much to offer yet, your most valuable currency is attention and effort. Find people who are 5 to 10 years ahead of you, people whose work you genuinely respect, and figure out how you can be helpful to them. Not in a transactional way, but because you're genuinely interested in their work and want to contribute. This might mean thoroughly researching their business and sending them a thoughtful analysis of an opportunity they're missing. It might mean creating something that helps them achieve their goals. It might mean introducing them to someone in your network who could be valuable to them. The key is you're leading with value, not asking for favors. You're treating them as a real person with real challenges, not as a networking opportunity. What happens when you do this consistently is remarkable. First, you stand out immediately because almost nobody does this. Most young people are asking for help, asking for introductions, asking for job opportunities. Someone who shows up offering genuine value is memorable. Second, you actually learn something valuable by trying to be helpful. You have to understand their world well enough to identify opportunities or solve problems. Third, when opportunities arise, you're the person they think of because you've already demonstrated capability and initiative. But here's the deeper insight. The best networks aren't built intentionally at all. They're built as a byproduct of doing interesting work and sharing it publicly. When you're creating valuable work and putting it out into the world, when you're thinking in public and documenting your learning, you naturally attract people who care about the same things you care about. These organic connections based on shared interests and mutual respect are far more valuable than forced networking relationships. This is why creating content, whether that's writing, podcasting, videos, or anything else, is such a powerful network building strategy. It's not about building an audience, although that's nice if it happens. It's about creating a beacon that attracts the people you want to connect with. Every piece of content you create is essentially saying, this is what I care about, this is how I think, these are the problems I'm interested in. People who resonate with that will reach out. You've pre-filtered for alignment. The practical implication is that you should be spending significant time creating visible work that represents your thinking and interests, even if it feels like nobody's paying attention at first. That struggling restaurant reviewer who starts a food blog isn't building an audience in the first year. They're building a body of work that demonstrates their taste and thinking. Eventually, that body of work creates opportunities, often from unexpected directions. And here's something crucial about networks that most people miss. The value of your network isn't in the strong connections, the people you know well. It's in the weak connections, the people at the periphery who exist in different worlds than you do. These weak ties are where novel information and unexpected opportunities come from. This is why you want to be visible to people beyond your immediate circle, why you want your work to circulate in communities you're not directly part of. Alright, we need to have an honest conversation about university because the discourse around this has become polarized and unhelpful. On one side, you have people defending the traditional path no matter what. On the other side, you have people saying university is obsolete and nobody should go. Both positions are wrong. The real answer is much more nuanced, and understanding this nuance could save you years of time and tens of thousands of dollars. University makes sense in specific situations. First, if you're pursuing a field with legal credential requirements, medicine, law in most jurisdictions, certain engineering disciplines, licensed psychology, teaching. You don't have a choice. The credential is a legal requirement to practice. In these fields, the question isn't whether to get the degree but how to get it most efficiently and affordably. Second, university makes sense if you can attend an elite institution where the primary value is the network and you can afford it without life-crushing debt. Notice I said elite institution. There's a real difference between Harvard and a mid-tier state school when it comes to network effects. The elite institutions give you access to a peer group and alumni network that creates opportunities for decades. But this only works if you actively use that network, if you build relationships, collaborate on projects, and stay connected after graduation. Third, university makes sense if you treat it like an intensive accelerator for building skills and proof of work, not just as a place to attend classes. This means you're joining research labs, building projects outside your coursework, starting things with other students, treating your education as raw material for creating visible work. In this model, the degree is almost incidental. What you're really getting is access to resources, mentorship, and a concentrated peer group for a few years. University does not make sense if you're going because that's what everyone does, because your parents expect it, or because you don't know what else to do. It doesn't make sense if you'll graduate with massive debt and no clear path to paying it off. It doesn't make sense if you're planning to passively attend classes, get decent grades, and assume the degree will automatically create opportunities. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In many fields, you can now get faster, cheaper, more relevant learning through alternative paths. Intensive boot camps that focus on applied skills and job placement. Online programs with recognized credentials that cost a fraction of traditional tuition. Apprenticeships where you get paid to learn. Self-directed learning where you build projects and portfolio pieces that demonstrate capability. The key question you need to ask isn't whether university is good or bad. It's whether university is the optimal path for your specific situation and goals. What are you actually trying to achieve? What credentials or skills do you need? What networks do you need access to? How much can you afford to invest in time and money? What alternative paths exist? Be brutally honest about your answers. And if you do decide to pursue a degree, have a clear strategy beyond just graduating. What specific experiences will you seek out? What projects will you build? What relationships will you develop? How will you ensure that your time there creates tangible career capital, not just a credential? Treat university as a resource you're strategically exploiting, not as a passive experience that happens to you. For most people in 2025 and beyond, the optimal path is probably hybrid. Some formal education to establish baseline knowledge and maybe provide a basic credential, combined with aggressive self-directed learning, real projects, online courses for specific skills, and continuous portfolio building. You're not choosing between traditional education and nothing. You're designing a custom learning path that combines the best elements of multiple approaches based on your specific goals. Let's get practical. Everything we've talked about is useless if you don't have a system for actually implementing it. So I'm going to walk you through a framework for building your own educational roadmap, whether you're 17 and deciding about college, 25 and feeling stuck in the wrong career, or 40 and realizing you need to pivot. Step 1 is defining your 10-year direction. Not your perfect plan, because that doesn't exist and trying to create it will paralyze you. Your draft direction. What problems do you find yourself thinking about when nobody's forcing you to? What work do you see other people doing that makes you think, I want to be doing that? What does a good workday look like to you? Are you solving technical problems, working with people, creating things, analyzing complex situations? Write this down, even though it feels vague and uncertain. The point isn't to lock yourself into a specific path. The point is to have a direction that guides your next set of decisions. You'll update this every 6 to 12 months as you learn more about what you actually enjoy and what you're good at. Having a draft direction prevents you from drifting aimlessly while keeping you flexible enough to pivot as you discover new information. Step 2 is reverse engineering people who are already there. Find 3 to 5 people who are doing work that resembles your 10-year direction. These don't need to be famous people. In fact, it's better if they're not, because you want to understand realistic paths, not outlier stories. Research what they actually do day to day, not just their job titles. Look at their work history, their projects, their skills, their networks. You'll start seeing patterns. Maybe they all have technical skills combined with communication abilities. Maybe they all have experience in multiple adjacent domains. Maybe they all built public portfolios early in their careers. These patterns tell you what capabilities actually matter in that field, which is usually very different from what job descriptions or career advisors say matters. Step 3 is choosing your learning path based on speed and cost to those capabilities. Now you have a clear picture of what skills and experiences you need. The question becomes how to acquire them most efficiently. Don't start with prestige or what sounds impressive. Start with what gets you those specific capabilities fastest for a price you can handle. If you need technical skills, maybe a 3-month intensive bootcamp beats 4 years of computer science coursework. If you need to understand business operations, maybe working at a startup beats an MBA. If you need research skills, maybe assisting with academic projects beats taking classes. If you need communication abilities, maybe creating content consistently beats communication courses. The key is being strategic and honest about what you're optimizing for. Are you optimizing for credentials, for skills, for network, for proof of work? Different paths excel at different things. A university degree gives you credentials and potentially network, but might be slow and expensive for skills. A bootcamp gives you skills quickly but might not provide credentials or network. Self-directed learning gives you flexibility but requires intense discipline. Most people will benefit from a hybrid approach. Maybe some formal education for structure and credentialing, combined with self-directed projects for portfolio building, online courses for specific skills, and strategic networking for relationship building. You're designing a custom curriculum that combines multiple sources based on your specific needs and constraints. Step 4 is building proof of work relentlessly. Whatever path you choose, you need to be creating visible artifacts of your capability. Every month, you should be shipping something other people can see and evaluate. This might be code on GitHub, design projects in your portfolio, case studies from client work, essays or analyses you've published, contributions to open source projects, anything that demonstrates you can take ideas from concept to completion. The discipline of regular shipping is transformative because it forces you to finish things, which is a completely different skill from starting things or making progress on things. Most people have dozens of half-finished projects. Few people have a track record of consistent shipping. Building this habit early creates a compounding advantage because each shipped project becomes part of your portfolio and teaches you lessons for the next project. Step 5 is using AI strategically without becoming dependent on it. Let AI explain concepts after you've struggled with them yourself. Use it to quiz your understanding, to review your work, to explore alternative approaches. Use it to handle routine tasks so you can focus on higher-level thinking. But maintain some friction in your learning process. Force yourself to struggle with hard problems before seeking AI assistance. Build the tolerance for confusion and the discipline of independent problem-solving. Think of AI as a tool that amplifies your capabilities but doesn't replace your thinking. You're using it to learn faster and go deeper, not to avoid the work of learning. This balance, using AI for leverage while maintaining human discipline, is what separates people who will thrive from people who will become dependent. Step 6 is networking through value creation. Don't network in the traditional sense of collecting contacts. Instead, create work that attracts the people you want to connect with. Write about what you're learning. Share your projects publicly. Contribute to things that matter to you. Help people who are slightly ahead of you without expecting anything in return. Build in public so people can discover you through your work. When you do connect with people, lead with value and genuine interest in their work. Show up with research, with ideas, with offers of help. Treat them as real humans with real challenges, not as networking opportunities. The relationships that create real career opportunities come from authentic connection and demonstrated value, not from transactional networking. We've covered a lot of tactical information, but none of it matters if you don't have the right underlying mindset. So let's talk about the mental model that separates people who successfully navigate this transition from people who get left behind. The fundamental shift you need to make is from consumption mindset to creation mindset. Most people approach their education and career as consumers. They're consuming information, consuming credentials, consuming opportunities. They're asking what they can get from schools, from employers, from mentors. This is backwards and it guarantees mediocrity. People who thrive approach everything as creators. They're asking what they can make, what they can contribute, what value they can add. They're not waiting for opportunities to be handed to them. They're creating opportunities by building things other people want, solving problems other people have, becoming people other people want to work with. This mindset shift changes everything. When you're a consumer, you're dependent on gatekeepers. You need someone to admit you, hire you, promote you, give you permission. When you're a creator, you have agency. You can start today. You can demonstrate capability immediately. You can create value before anyone gives you a chance. The second mental shift is from fixed path thinking to portfolio thinking. Most people still think in terms of single paths. I'll be a doctor, or an engineer, or a marketer. This made sense when careers were stable and predictable. It doesn't make sense anymore. The people who thrive think in terms of capability portfolios that can be recombined in multiple ways. You're not locking yourself into one identity. You're building a collection of skills, experiences, relationships, and proof of work that creates optionality. Maybe you start in technical work, then move into product management, then launch your own company, then transition into consulting and teaching. Each phase builds on the previous phases, but you're not trapped in any single path. This portfolio approach reduces risk because you're not dependent on a single industry or job category. It increases opportunity because you can see possibilities at the intersection of your diverse capabilities that specialists miss. It makes you anti-fragile because when one area gets disrupted, you have other areas to fall back on or pivot into. The third shift is from credential thinking to capability thinking. Stop optimizing for impressive-sounding credentials and start optimizing for genuine capabilities that create value. A credential is a signal that you might be capable. A capability is proof that you are capable. In a world where AI is making credentials easier to obtain and harder to verify, authentic capability is becoming exponentially more valuable. Ask yourself, what can I actually do? Not what have I studied, what certifications do I have, what titles have I held? What can I do? What problems can I solve? What value can I create? What results can I deliver? Build capabilities that answer those questions, and the credentials become less important. The fourth shift is from scarcity mindset to abundance mindset about knowledge. Stop hoarding information and start sharing everything you learn. There's an outdated belief that your knowledge is your competitive advantage and you should protect it. This is completely backwards in a world where information is abundant and attention is scarce. Your competitive advantage isn't what you know. It's how you think, how you synthesize information, how you apply knowledge to novel situations, how you communicate your insights, how you build relationships. None of that is threatened by sharing what you're learning. In fact, sharing accelerates your learning because teaching forces clarity, attracts people who can teach you, and builds your reputation as someone who creates value. The people who are winning right now are the ones who learn in public, who document their journey, who share their insights generously. They're building reputation, network, and opportunity through open collaboration rather than through closed competition. This is a fundamental shift from how previous generations thought about knowledge work, and understanding it creates massive advantages. We're near the end, so let me give you a concrete action plan you can start implementing today, regardless of where you are in your educational or career journey. First, spend 1 hour this week writing out your 10-year direction. Not your perfect plan, your draft direction. What work appeals to you? What problems interest you? What does a good workday look like? Write it down even if it feels vague. This becomes your compass for the next set of decisions. Second, identify 3 people who are doing work that resembles your direction. Don't pick celebrities or obvious choices. Pick people whose actual work you can research and understand. Spend time understanding their path, their capabilities, their projects. What patterns do you see? What skills keep appearing? What experiences seem important? Third, audit your current situation honestly. What capabilities do you actually have right now? What proof of work exists? What gaps exist between where you are and where those 3 people are? What's your financial situation? What time constraints do you have? What support or resources do you have access to? Be brutally honest because accurate assessment leads to better decisions. Fourth, design your next 6-month learning sprint. Based on the gaps you identified, what's the highest leverage thing you could learn or build in the next 6 months? Not the most prestigious thing, not the thing that sounds best, the thing that most directly moves you toward your direction. What learning path makes sense for that specific skill or experience? What project could you build that would create proof of work? Fifth, commit to shipping one thing per month for the next 6 months. It doesn't need to be big. It needs to be finished and visible. A blog post, a small project, a contribution to an open source repository, a case study, a video, anything that demonstrates your thinking and capability. Build the habit of consistent shipping because that's what creates portfolio and opportunities. Sixth, start learning in public. Document what you're learning, share your projects, write about your insights. You don't need a huge audience. You need to build the habit of visible creation. This attracts opportunities, clarifies your thinking, and builds your network organically. Pick one platform and commit to consistent presence there. Seventh, identify one person to reach out to with genuine value. Someone slightly ahead of you whose work you respect. Research them thoroughly. Find a specific way you could be helpful to them. Reach out with that value, not with asks. Build one authentic relationship based on contribution rather than transaction. Eighth, protect your capacity for deep work and productive struggle. Set boundaries around AI use. Commit to tackling some things without immediate assistance. Build the muscle of sitting with confusion and working through it. This tolerance for difficulty is what separates people who can handle genuinely hard problems from people who can only execute clear instructions. Finally, review and adjust every 3 months. Your direction will evolve. New information will emerge. Unexpected opportunities will appear. Every quarter, look at what's working, what's not, what you've learned about yourself, what you've learned about the market. Adjust your plan based on real feedback from the world rather than clinging to your original assumptions. Here's what this all comes down to. The question isn't whether university is worth it or whether AI will take your job. The real question is whether you're developing the capabilities that make you the kind of person who can thrive in uncertainty, who can create value in novel situations, who can learn whatever needs to be learned when it needs to be learned. Everything else, the specific credentials you get, the exact path you take, the particular skills you master first, those are all implementation details. What matters is whether you're building the meta capabilities that allow you to adapt to whatever comes next. Because we don't know what the job market will look like in 10 years. We don't know which specific skills will be valuable. We don't know which industries will be growing and which will be contracting. But we do know that the people who can teach themselves hard things, who can think in systems, who can tolerate ambiguity and struggle, who can create proof of their capabilities, who can build authentic relationships, who can ship consistently, those people will find opportunities regardless of how the market evolves. They have the fundamental capabilities that create options in any environment. This is actually incredibly liberating once you internalize it. You don't need to predict the future perfectly. You don't need to make the exact right choice about education or career path. You need to develop the capabilities that make you adaptable, that give you agency, that let you create value wherever you end up. Those capabilities are more valuable than any specific knowledge or credential because they determine your trajectory over decades, not just your first job. So as you're making decisions about your education and career, don't ask what's the safest path or what sounds most impressive or what other people are doing. Ask what will build these fundamental capabilities. What will force you to struggle and grow? What will give you opportunities to ship and build proof of work? What will expose you to complex systems and real-world problems? What will help you develop the confidence that you can figure anything out? Those are the questions that lead to good decisions. And the beautiful thing is the answers are different for everyone based on your situation, your resources, your interests, your constraints. There's no single right path. There's only your path, designed intentionally based on where you are and where you want to go. The world is changing faster than it ever has. That's scary if you're trying to cling to the old playbook. But it's incredibly exciting if you're willing to develop the capabilities that let you thrive in change. The opportunities that are emerging, the problems that need solving, the value that can be created, they're bigger than they've ever been. They just require a different approach than what worked for previous generations. You have access to more learning resources, more tools, more information, more connection than any generation in history. The question is whether you'll use those resources to develop genuine capability or just consume endless information without building anything real. Whether you'll take the harder path of struggling and growing or the easier path of optimization and credentialism. Whether you'll lead with creation and value or wait for permission and opportunity. These are the choices that determine everything. Make them consciously, make them based on your actual goals and values, and commit to them fully once you've made them. That's how you build a career and a life that works in the age of AI. Not by following someone else's playbook, but by developing the capabilities that let you write your own.